Let me turn down the radio a little bit. There we go. Finally, the moment you all have been waiting for. The review of my 1970 Lincoln Continental Mark III. edsautoreviews official company car. And so here it is. Finally, I realized my lifelong dream of owning a classic American car, and I bought a 1970 Lincoln Continental Mark III. And I hear you think, what is this car? Well, if you really want to insult the car and the owner, you'd say that this is a stretch Ford Thunderbird with a Rolls-Royce grille dumped on it. But then you'd be kind of right, because that's essentially what it is. This is a stretch Ford Thunderbird with a Rolls-Royce grille on it. I'm not going to go too much into the details about the development of this car and the history, because I already made a beautiful video about that, which was also a love letter to this car way before I bought it. But the short story is that this was Lincoln's personal luxury car, the absolute pinnacle of the Ford family of fine cars, so the most expensive car you could buy from Ford at the time, and a direct competitor to the Cadillac Eldorado, which came out a few years before. And so, as always, let's start with that name, that glorious name, Lincoln Continental Mark III. Lincoln Mark III. Continental Mark III? Whew. Yeah, it's kind of a confusing story whether this car is a Lincoln or strictly a Continental, and I already made a very confusing video on that, because it is a confusing story, not helped by Ford marketing department themselves, as they kind of shuffled around the Mark series name, the Continental name, and the Lincoln name in various configurations. But truth to be told is, I dare to say that this is not a Lincoln, but strictly a Continental. So, make Continental, model Mark III. And reasons for me to believe that is, you won't find the Lincoln badge anywhere on the car or in the brochures. You won't find it in the VIN, you won't find it on the engine plaque in the engine bay, you won't find it on the brochures, you won't find it in the commercials, you won't find it on the dealer invoice, you won't find it on the build sheet. It is strictly Continental. And I hear you think, oh, but what about the Lincoln logo on the C-pillar? No, that's not the Lincoln logo, that's the Continental star. I'm not making this up. But then, to make it even more confusing, if you open the door, you'll be greeted by a little plaque that says Ford Mark III. But this is not a Ford, damn it, you peasants. This is a Lincoln. Continental. So let's talk about the exterior styling of the Lincoln Continental Mark III. I decided to do this in first-person view instead of showing every little detail with my face on it. I think this is a lot easier and shows you exactly what I mean. Because I'm going to discuss the styling, why I like it, as well as I think give you a little bit of an insider's perspective. I'm by no means a car designer, but there are a few tricks in the design that I think is absolutely cool. And it just starts with the overall size and proportions. It has that typical American longer, wider, lower coolness, which makes me love American cars so much. This is how an American Rolls-Royce would have looked like if the Americans would design a Rolls. Instead of like this upright and stately appearance of the Rolls, it has that longer, wider, lower look, especially from this angle. And it starts with the proportions, which I think are just right. It has that long hood, short deck proportions that was also popular on the Ford Mustang. So a relatively long hood and a relatively short trunk. In fact, it has one of the longest hoods in the industry at the time. But it gives the car somewhat of a sporty appearance. Not in a way that this is a sports car, absolutely not. But it gives it a somewhat dynamic like size. And that's another thing. I really like the Mark III in a way that Americans can design cars that look absolutely beautiful or a little weird, and there is almost no middle ground. So sometimes the proportions are just right, and sometimes they are just a little bit off. And a great example is what I absolutely love about the Mark III is what I more or less hate about the Mark IV. I think the Mark IV and V are kind of like an exaggeration of this car, becoming almost like a caricature by making the hood even longer and the car even wider and even lower, and then it loses kind of this magic. This car, I think, for an American car, is chic without being gaudy, is stylish without being overdone. And have you ever noticed, I don't know if you can see it, the roof comes at a slight angle. It slopes kind of downwards instead of being straight. And that gives you somewhat of a forced perspective from this side. the car appears longer than it is. And so we come to the front. Interesting to note is that right at the time when this car came out, most American cars had an emphasis on horizontality. So you had, you know, two round headlights right next to each other and a wide grille that emphasizes the width of the car. The Mark III, however, has an emphasis on verticality, thanks to these cornering lights on both corners of the car, which are upright, and of course the center Rolls-Royce-esque grille in the middle. It is also a car that introduced the next wave in styling, as in this is more of a throwback styling to cars of the 1930s, so more Brougham or neoclassical or neo-baroque as they call it, in a time when most cars were still like modernistic. But it was quite daring to dump this grille on the front of it. It was heavily debated at the time, but eventually it worked, as almost the entire American car industry moved to this design by the mid-70s, including almost the entire Ford family of fine cars. I love the grille because it's not tall, it's square. And as opposed to, once again, the Mark IV, which especially the 72 model with not with the bumpers, the 5 mph bumpers with regular bumpers, you can see that it is a little more flat and a little longer, and I think it's just a little bit too big. This is just right-sized, and it's typically an American in the way that it's not flat but beveled. It has that typical V shape that Americans loved at the cars at the time. Everything needs to be beveled. This also includes the hidden headlights, where you see this slight line going down the middle. By deciding to have hidden headlights, so essentially the color of the body, that allows for a rather simple, easy design that puts more emphasis on its centerpiece, which is an actual centerpiece. And it's kind of like an analogy with like jewelry. So expensive watches, jewels, rings and whatnot, they're always presented in this little box surrounded by this fabric like suede or satin or whatever it is. And that is made just to make sure that the thing stands out, right? And the same thing goes with this, because what they could have done is just have regular exposed headlights. And you can see it on this picture right here from one of the design studies before the Mark III came out. They had exposed headlights, and it gives the car somewhat of a fuller look. Okay, it's fine, but then the grille kind of gets lost in there. And so we go to the hidden headlights. First of all, it's the size and the position, because in later Lincolns from the mid-70s that pretty much had the same styling, sometimes these hidden headlights were put all the way in the corners, and especially if you had your headlights activated, that gave the car somewhat of a retarded look, in my opinion. And on the corner we find the rectangular cornering lamps. And I really like the design. What do I not like about this car? But hear me out. Here's the second thing. By kind of setting or offsetting the lights from the chrome trim by this black line, you kind of get that similar effect as I just talked about with the jewelry. So it kind of lays on a patch of suede or satin or whatever you want to call it, and it works. It adds to the verticality of the car. And also what I like is that the bumpers kind of are tucked under there and curve. So it almost looks like the bumpers carry the turn signals, and kind of like crystal chandeliers, something like that. Maybe I'm imagining things, but you kind of, I hope you kind of see what I mean. And so we come to the side. Not a lot of chrome, except of the chrome strip running across the top of the fender. And that gives the car somewhat of an understated look. I just talked about like the proportions, and also the proportions in a way that the roof section meets the rear wheels. I kind of like it when the entire roof section and the greenhouse, as it's called, is kind of pushed back a bit for a longer hood and meets the rear wheels. I think that looks very sexy. And what I also like is that it has these flared wheel arches, because it just breaks up the car nicely. I mean, imagine this car without these flared wheel arches, and I think it would look a little too plain. It does add a little visual element to the design of the car, especially from this angle, where you kind of see how these almost kind of curve over, like dramatically curve over the wheels. I love it. I believe I'm correct when I say that the car came in two wheel styles. You have this turbine style wheel that was offered in more or less of a reference to 1930s cars, where they had this center hub where all the spoke of the wooden wheels came together. And then you have this one, the flat disc design, and I'm not entirely sure which one I like more. And then here you have the Lincoln logo, or the Continental Star, and that's pretty much it at announcing that this is a Lincoln or a Mark, especially in later years when I think, you know, the cars are getting more gaudy. I remember a buddy of mine who owns a '78 Ford Thunderbird. We had a blast finding out how many Lincoln logos you could, how many Thunderbird logos you could find on the car. This one, it's just a bit more understated. There is some debate on the body lines. I really like that it has a little belt line kick-up. That was typical for the time. I can understand that some people think it looks a little odd compared to the shape of the C-pillar. Kind of that the C-pillar kicks up like that, and it doesn't really match with the kind of the curve of the belt line. And I think that in this case the Mark IV did it a little better, where it was kind of following the line, so then it kind of kicks up right here instead of kind of pushing out like it does right now. And so we come to the rear, which, if you look closely, is kind of a copy of the front end. And I can appreciate cars where the front end kind of or the rear end kind of mimics the front end styling, in a way that you have the cornering lamps on the corners at the front. You also have the tail lights on the back. These tail lights are small. I parked this car right next to any ordinary European small city car, and like the tail lights are a lot bigger than these are. But this is a visual trick, because making these tail lights, especially from the rear, I mean, if you look directly behind it, they are very narrow, but by doing this, the car appears very wide. And that's another visual trick. There is this I believe it's the 68 regular Lincoln Continental Coupe, so not the Mark series but the Coupe, which had a similar design, and you can just see how like wide the car is thanks to the very narrow tail lights, instead of like large horizontal tail lights that go across the rear end of the body. But what is nice, however, is that it is broken up, as opposed to that Lincoln I just showed you. It is broken up by this rear Continental spare tire hump. Now, this was also a design trick that was somewhat controversial, because Continental tire kits were a thing of the 1930s, had a bit of popularity in the 1950s, but were increasingly seen as, you know, gaudy and an overplayed styling joke. But yet it did find its way onto the car, more or less as also a reference to the past, to the Continental Mark IIs and the earlier Continentals from the 1940s. And it also has a visual relationship, of course, with the square grille up front. So you have a grille up front that you know, breaks up the car at the front nicely, and so you got the same thing going on in the back. It looks okay, all right, but I can understand that for some people it might look a bit odd, especially from this angle. You'll see it kind of sticks out at this odd angle. Then at the same time, it also helps you with parking, so it's kind of like a visual aid when you want to back up your car. You can determine where the end of the car is by looking at this tire hump. Now, there is this Imperio from the mid-60s, I'll show you a picture right now, which has more like a squared off version of that. I think the car would benefit from a design such as that, but you know, it is what it is. As you can see here, please don't look at the little dent right there. That's the only major dent I have, but over here you have the Continental inscription along with the Lincoln logo. And guess what? Also a awesome sticker, bumper sticker, which you can get from Ed's Auto Reviews, Ed's Automotive Art Emporium. It's not really a tall rear end, it's relatively squeezed. And the trunk at the same time is also relatively tall compared to some other cars. And that, compared to a relatively low roofline, leads to a very dramatic rear windshield. And because the windshield is so narrow, especially from this side, it once again emphasizes the wideness of the car. Under the massive hood you'll find a massive engine, the Ford 460 cubic inch or 7.5 liters V8. Essentially the cream of the crop of the Ford family of fine cars. Pretty much the biggest engine found in the Lincolns, the Deluxe Mercurys, and I believe eventually also in some Ford cars. Within the cubic inch race at the time, this was also one of the largest engines available, only trumped even larger than some GM engines, which came at 455 cubic inches, so that's 5 inches more, and we all know how much 5 inches difference makes, huh? But only trumped by Cadillac's 500 or 8.2 liter V8, but that's just sheer stupidity. Anyway, so Lincoln 460, and this was known back in 1970 and 71, before all the emission stuff that happened, as a pretty beefy engine. This car was known as kind of like a hot rod Lincoln that sent your daddy drinking, because the power output is anywhere near 350, 375 horsepower. But I'll do you one better, because for whatever reason, I don't know who, what, when, how, or why, someone decided to replace the engine in this particular car with not a 1970 460, but a 1975 engine. So the engine is still correct to the car, so like you would find this engine also in the Mark IV or the 5 at the time, but it's a 1975 engine. And you need to know that a lot happened between 1970 and 1975, in a way that the emission crap was added to the cars, you had the oil crisis, they were detuned and so on. Now, all the emission crap has been removed of the car, but it still has a detuned compression ratio, so this engine doesn't make 375 horsepower. It has been rated at 220 horsepower. Still, I got the torques. But yeah, so this car is a little slower than it needs to be, but even then, but I don't push the gas pedal anywhere beyond the halfway point, so I really like to take it easy with this car, and I think this car is not fast, but it's not slow either. And last but not least, 4V. Is that 4 valves? So like 4 valves per cylinder makes it a 32 valve engine? No, that would be way too technologically advanced for Americans at the time. This is Ford marketing lingo, meaning 4 Venturi. So that means that this is a big old 4-barrel carburetor, and the only thing you need to know is that this thing likes to suck air, suck fuel, and above all, suck money right out of my pockets. The interior is luxurious and looks transatlantic. It's decidedly American, but wouldn't look all that out of place in a Jaguar or a Bentley. I like being in here. It has the 3 ingredients of luxury: wood, chrome, and leather. The wood is real, the leather is comfy and brown. It's warm, it's inviting, and it reminds me of Cuban cigars, Chesterfield couches, cognac, and wood-paneled furniture that you find in gentlemen's clubs. No, not that type of gentlemen's clubs. This is a country club, not a bordello. This is chic without being gaudy. This is the interior of the Mark III. Allow me to introduce the dashboard. And there's a lot going on, but I'm going to show you everything. In front of you, you're provided by 5 holes, or really 6, that provide information, air, and controls. On the left side, you'll find the oil gauge, as well as the fuel gauge, as well as a fuel warning light. Right next to it, you'll find the speedometer and the odometer. And right next to it, you'll find the tachometer. No tachometer, because I don't need to count me no RPMs when I got an automatic. Here, you have a clock, which is in Roman numericals. I believe in like the first year it was still normal numbers, but now they switched to Roman numericals just to make it appear more kind of classical. I mean, at this rate of progress, you'd probably expect that the speedometer was in Roman numericals as well. In the middle, in this genuine wood-shaped, hourglass-shaped wood piece, genuine wood, you'll find the lights for the indicators, and they indicate left or right, so you know which one is on, as well as a little hole right there that comes on when you have your high beams on, so it lets you know that you get your high beams on. Right next to it, you'll find your alternator and your temperature gauge, as well as a little short track thing that was an early version of ABS. And right next to it, you'll find the wiper controls. Now, this I absolutely love because it's hooked up to the vacuum system. The wipers are infinitely adjustable, infinitely variable. And that makes me wonder, why don't have modern cars stuff like that? I mean, so you just activate it and then you can switch the dial to have it like faster or slower. And that makes me wonder, why don't the modern cars have stuff like that? Because now you have these very overcomplicated controls on like the turning stalk for the wiper controls, when all you need is just one simple button. And then we got the rest of the wood paneling with, of course, the Continental Mark III inscription and another air vent right there. Below that, we find a unit that is kind of common on luxury Fords at the time. It includes the air vents right here, as well as controls for the radio. I believe my radio currently doesn't work, but I also have an 8-track player for those that know what that is, 8 tracks, with the lovely Mark III inscription. Here's another standard trick on American cars which I love, the see-through like gear selectors. So there is this little needle that shows you right behind the letters in what gear you're in, park, reverse, neutral, drive, or low or high. Right behind the steering wheel, and on the left side you'll find the pièce de résistance, which I absolutely find amazing. Automatic temperature control, or really climate control. I got climate control. For the record, air conditioning for us Europeans in cars was even a luxury in the 1990s. Climate control even today is still an option that might not be present on your car. And here it is, almost 50 years or 40 years earlier, this car comes with fully functional climate control. So this also means that I have air conditioning. You just put the system on, you set it on your desired temperature, which is in Fahrenheit, so 70, 75 or 80, and you put like the fan speed, which is, high, low, or off, or defog or de-ice, and the car regulates it itself. It's such absolute luxury and comfort that I absolutely love about these American cars. And the thing is, it works. It just works. I got working air conditioning on a car like this. In fact, almost everything works. The clock works, it shows the wrong time, but it works. All the gauges work, and especially the fuel gauge works a little too well. I don't know what it is in miles a gallon. I'll show you that in like the screen. I drive real easy. I really take it easy when driving this car. I get about 5 kilometers to a liter of fuel. A while ago, I went for a long stretch on the highway, like a real long stretch. I did that on cruise control, and I got even up to 6.5 kilometers on a liter of fuel, which is fantastic. But like the biggest thing I have with this is that I have a 90-liter fuel tank. Combined with the fuel consumption, I have a usable range of about 400 kilometers. Now, that gives me genuine range anxiety of driving this car. Not because I, have to fill up again thinking, oh, there goes my money, but more like, oh, come on. Are you already thirsty again? It's absolutely fantastic. It's just, I get range anxiety driving this car. I mean, you don't really have a lot of usable range with this fuel economy and the size of the tank, even though the size of the tank is massive. Last but not least, we have this awesome steering wheel. Instead of like a small steering wheel with a thick rim that you have in modern day cars, I really love that I get a big steering wheel with a thin rim, 3-spoke with a little wood right here and the Lincoln logo, and you gotta love it. I have rim blow. It was a limited, well, not a limited option. It was only offered for a limited time because the system failed, but it has a little contact strip in there, and so you really have to push it in to activate it, and I love it. It's just sheer comfort. Instead of trying to reach for the center, you just, you're already holding the wheel in your hand, so it only requires a little. The only thing I can think of why this is not a good idea is because if someone cuts you off and you're angry in the car, you're just gonna, and then you accidentally sound the horn. Or maybe it's a good thing to let the other one know that he cut you off. Then we got, well, I'm not done yet. Then we got the controls on the doors, which are absolutely beautifully designed with the leather and the wood, this wood strip like here, right here. We got the door handles, which are big, wide, fat, and nice. And you got the controls right here. This is another thing that I absolutely love. You got the mirror control. It's a joystick that's just mechanically operated, and it gives you instant feedback. Just take a look. And why would you have this electronically where it can break down when all you need is just a simple like metal cable running from the joystick to the mirror, and gives you direct instant feedback instead of like a slow motor that is just. Then you got your seat controls. You got the joystick right here for your seats as well as front and rear tilt. Then you got your window controls. All the windows are electrically operated. And then you got your locking mechanism for your windows and your doors, which is fun because it's hooked up to your vacuum system. So the car just simply sucks. It literally sucks. It kind of holds back its breath until it's like released again. There we go. Last but not least, we have the controls up here, which I think is absolutely fantastic. In the name of convenience, you have 4 lights that show you, for instance, that you need to put on your seatbelts, and that's activated when you open the door. Then we get the door ajar. That comes on when the door is still open, and I believe you have the like the system activated. Then you get the headlamps. So if your headlamps are activated, this one comes on, and then you have the trunk open, and that comes on when you have the trunk open, which is conveniently placed right here. You can hear it. It's vacuum operated. Once again, you hear kind of like the sound. And then this light comes on as well. This is not a Mark exclusive. I always thought it was, but this was carried over from the Thunderbird. And it's interesting because it kind of gives me this space agey feeling that you would expect this stuff on, let's say, a late 50s American car with the big tail fins, because it kind of seems more, you know, space age, and not on a luxury brougham car like this. But you know, it's a fun gimmick. Now, as much as this entire interior with its dashboard is made for just convenience, which I can really get used to, like this, you know, center armrest, there are also a few little nitpicky things that makes me wonder, they may have gotten a second thought on this before they released the car, including such things like the wiper controls are just a little too far out of reach, or I have real short arms. But the thing is, I'm presented with 5 holes. I wouldn't mind it if the alternator and temperature gauge was moved to the outer hole and the wiper controls moved to the inner hole. Why? Because I can perfectly see the gauges and I don't need to interact with them. But like I said, the wipers are just a little too far away. If they were placed right here, I could activate them. Another thing is that the door handles in this car are different. Instead of the usual kind of grab and pull door handles you find on most cars, it's more like a handle tucked into the armrest, and you really don't want to confuse that for an ashtray, because the ashtray is down here for the driver, but like the passenger side does have a ashtray right in front of it. Then there are such things as these lights I just talked about. They're easy to miss. So you really need a back passenger to tell you, or that you need to be aware of this, and that you may have left your headlights on or something like that. And the last thing is, this is what I noticed, that whenever I drive with my girlfriend, she sometimes likes to do her makeup in the car, and then she wants to fold out this mirror. But as soon as you do that, you can see it right here. It blocks my rear view mirror, and it also pushes it away in such a way that it becomes absolutely useless. So that's kind of like a developer's oversight. And so we come to the trunk, which is of course huge. I have a trunk release conveniently placed in the glove compartment in the interior, as well as a key for the keyhole, which is hidden behind the Lincoln logo. And that's real American design for you, because you always want to hide that type of stuff. So you push the logo away, put the key in, and you open the trunk. And then you'll see that it has plenty of space. For instance, you can store stuff like this awesome edsautoreviews tote bag, which you can buy at Ed's Automotive Emporium. And also, oh God, I forgot. I have to murder someone at like 4 o'clock this afternoon. Oh, we'll take care of that when we get there. So, yeah, pretty spacious. I usually rent it out to a family of 4 during the summer months, and during the winter months I mostly rent it out to murderers.
It's showtime! Introducing Roy C.
Alright, driving the Lincoln Continental Mark III. I've owned it for half a year now, so I've owned it for some time, so I know a couple of things I want to talk about while driving this car, or talk about the driving characteristics of this car. And the first one is, this car invites you to drive relaxed. It's my personal kind of belief that you can make driving as stressful or as relaxed as you want it to be, but the car invites you to drive it real easy and not be in a hurry. You can be in a hurry because trying to take any corner or roundabout too fast, and we got plenty of roundabouts over here, you will lean all over the place. It kind of moves about, so you really take it easy. And it also takes the stress out of yourself. And when I drive it, I almost get a sense of carelessness. I don't care that I'm driving slow. I don't care that I got an oversized 7.5 liter V8 that only makes 220 horsepower. You know, people coming up saying, oh, does it only make that much power? You know, I got a Honda Civic that is riced out, and I get a... Sure, fine. I don't care. You can get me anytime you want. I don't care. In fact, it goes for most people. I like to get out on the, get on the highway and just take the rightmost lane, the truck lane, and drive truck speed. So 60 miles an hour, put the cruise control on, blare some music in there in the back, and just stay there and enjoy the ride. And if people are thinking that I'm slow, please do pass me. I don't care. Because I'll get to your destination maybe 5-10 minutes later, but I do get it in absolute utmost, relaxation. And I don't care that I get about 5 minutes later at my destination. I don't care. I'm just here driving my boat. That's really the American way, just making driving as uncomplicated and simple as it is. Because are you going to take it out on the track every weekend like we Europeans do or something like that? No. So why don't you make it easy for yourself? And these are such little things like the dimming mirror. So I just have to flip it, and then you get like the night vision mode so that you don't get blinded by the glaring lights of the other cars. It's such things like the trunk release that is in the glove compartment, so for easy trunk opening. It is such things like the the high beams that are operated by my foot on the floor. It is such things like the manual operated mirror, side view mirror. You get direct feedback from the joystick. It is such things like the cruise control I have. It's the climate control that I have, and it all works. And it is, what was the other thing? It's that little light in like the back window that I can see from my rear view mirror that tells me that my brake lights work. It doesn't require any effort at all. It's the lights up top that tell me that my doors are open. It's that little light in the middle, right in front of me, that tells me that I have my high beams on. It's my infinitely variable wipers instead of 5,000 different types of controls on the turning stalks. It's that I can slightly push my turning indicator to activate the turning signal instead of really putting it into position and putting it down again for easy lane change on the highway. It all adds up to just a relaxed experience. And that's another thing, because I noticed that whenever I like to, take out the car for a spin, I usually tend to include quite a few stretches of highway. Why? This car was built for highway cruising. You got enough dike roads, like curvy roads over here, and they are wide enough, they're not as narrow as, let's say, some streets in Italian towns or whatever. So like the whole thing, oh, this thing is too big for Europe. Nah, sometimes it needs a little getting used to, but overall it's fine. Our roads are just also perfectly wide enough for this stuff. But even then, every time you're driving on one of those roads, some other car passes you, like a freight truck or like a van, you always have this slight uneasy feeling that, it's getting a little too narrow. And out on the highway, it's just, you got all the space you need. For instance, I once drove a 1970s MGB, just a 4-cylinder version, and that car was great to take out on the small twisty roads, because you don't really want to drive it any faster than 50 miles an hour, 80 kilometers, because I also took that out onto the highway, and then everything starts to shake, rattle, and roll when you get at about 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles. But this thing, absolutely not. It's quiet. I got my air conditioning, I got my cruise control, just roll down the window, arm out, and cruise down onto the highway where it's just going straight. That's what this thing is made of. Then there is one other thing I want to talk about, and that is the suspension. Now, I know what I signed up for, because I wanted a car with the classic boulevard ride, as they call it. And even this car, in the realm of 1960s and 70s American cars, was which were already rather, soft, soggy suspension floatboat cars. This one was notorious for being ultra soft, and it is soft. But even and I like soft suspension, but even to my standards, I know I can't complain, but I think the suspension is a bit too soft, if you know what I mean. Allow me to explain. I see car suspension pretty much as like a bell curve. On the left side or the right side or whatever, you'll find cars like my girlfriend's Fiat 500. She drives this great little car. It's a fun little thing, but that car just crashes into everything. Even road markings feel like speed bumps. That thing just bumps into anything. Then on the top of that, you'll find cars like my daily driver, my Hyundai XG350. Now that car is 20 years old right now, But the sole reason I still drive it is simply because of the suspension. I love it. It's comfortable, it's soft, but without being overly floaty, if you know what I mean. So it really is like a very comfortable ride, and I love that car. And then on the other end, you'll find suspension so soft that it almost becomes uncomfortable, like this Lincoln. Because it just, I don't know, like the Lincoln engineers of suspension probably should have revealed their secrets to like NASA rocket space engineers, because they found new dimensions that were otherwise unknown to mankind. As in, this car just finds dimensions that were otherwise unknown. If you go over a bump, it not only goes up and down, it moves to the left and the right as well. When you go over a bump, that you will feel it 3 times. So the first time is the bump, the second time it still moves up and down, and the third time it kind of bottoms out or levels out. And it's not only going up and down, you move to side as well. So if you go over a bump, it's more like And so there is another thing. There are quite a few like cobblestone streets in my town, as well as a few speed bumps, and I don't know, where you drive with the Fiat 500, you just, you shake all around. Here it kind of travels all through the body, so you're kind of more wallowing around. And that makes me wonder, is this true comfort, or is it, well, I wouldn't say unpleasant, but I can understand that people will get seasick. But at the end of every drive, there is one final challenge: parking. The motorist pot of gold. Now, at the end of the day, it usually works out. So sometimes I look at Google Maps at like some convenient parking lots where there's plenty of space for the car. And sometimes if I just roll up at a parking space, I usually try to find the easiest spot where I can back it in and back it out without damaging other cars or holding up traffic at the parking lot. But still, it requires sometimes a little bit of attention and effort. So no one in their right mind is going to try to shove this big and beautiful neo-Gothic cathedral into an underground parking garage. But that's exactly what I'm going to do, because the place where I store this car is an underground parking lot. So there's no way getting around to drive into this this parking garage every time I'm done driving this car, as I shall now demonstrate. Alright, we're now rolling into the parking garage, and here's actually the fun part. I can tell you a thing or two about it, because especially the entry point of this garage requires a little bit of attention, because it's really cramped. And here's the fun part: I can tell it is genuinely cramped because I actually work in the parking industry as an advisor when it comes to the design of parking garages, so that the spaces are wide enough, that the ramps aren't too steep, and that you can easily make the turns. I can tell you this garage is not up to code, and that's not because I drive an oversized neo-Gothic cathedral. It's more like, even with a modern day car, or like a normal car, or even like a Fiat 500 my girlfriend, she even experiences problems getting into this garage. So you really have to be careful right here, because there's not a lot of space. You don't really want to scrape your car on the right, but you also don't really want to scrape it on the left. So it really is a tight fit, it really is. Luckily I have my front fenders that extend so I can kind of determine where the car ends. And then you have to carefully move through this. And the thing is, as soon as you think you're through, that's the moment where you want to start pay attention, because then, oh, I'm through, so you hit it. But that's the moment that you can possibly damage or scrape the car. But we're through. I've done this countless times already, so it's not really a big, big deal. But that brings us to our second thing, which is backing up into a parking spot. Now, in this parking garage, we have this kind of like gentleman's agreement that everyone with a classic car parks in the outer rows, and you really don't want to park them like at the inner rows, because that's where that little lovely lady comes up with her Hyundai Getz from 20 years old, parks next to you, and bumps into your car when she opens the door. So we have kind of like the back row, which is which are preferred spaces. And there is a space right next to its little sister, the Continental Mark V. And the fun thing is, he is parked over 2 parking spaces. It isn't allowed, but there's not a lot of space left here. So what are we going to do is that we have 3 parking spaces that is kind of cut up between 2 cars. A Mark V and a Mark III. So I'm just going to back it in. Now this is the easiest spot really to back it in. So I'm gonna try anyway, but I have to back up one more time. There we go. Put it in reverse. Make sure I don't hit that beautiful Mark V. But also don't hit that column as well. And this is where really the extended rear fenders and the rear tire hump come in. They really help you determine where the car ends. And that's actually one thing that I learned from someone else. He says, well, parking these cars is not as hard as you think it is. Just look at where the car ends. That's where the car ends, right? So there's no real need to go beyond that point. If you see your rear fender scratch the wall, you know you're far enough. Oh, well, that's the rim blow horn for you. And the thing is, the only thing left is for me is to kind of determine whether I'm back or far enough back without hitting the wall. And just take your time. Really take it easy. Pop it in neutral. Just step out. Have a good look and see that there's still enough space back there so I can reverse a little more and be your own external parking sensor. That's pretty much what it is. We're finished. So we're gonna pop it in park, roll up the window, roll up the window, there we go, and we're done. If you wish to know more about the design and development history of the Mark III, click the video in the top left. If you wish to know more about the confusing Continental nameplate history, click the video in the bottom left.